Can you guys see the slides? I mm, just wait a couple of minutes as your colleagues are joining us. Okay, let's get started. If you have any questions, just please stop me in the middle and then we can take it forward. This was actually designed to be kind of like a workshop in which you participate, but I understand with so few people and in this virtual environment that might be a little difficult to do. But my attempt is to make sure that I can demystify this process as much as possible. Okay, so I'm just going to start off with a discussion about why are you so stressed about this entire idea of writing critical essay. We are then going to delve into a simple understanding of what critical analysis actually is. Then we are going to unpick and unpack a specific reading, which is Performance Management Revolution, which I shared with you, and to see how you can take a piece of work and deconstruct it to understand its different parts and to be more critical in using that piece of work in your essay. And then we have time for questions and queries. Okay, so if you could use the chat box or indeed the just raise your hand. Like, what are your concerns? Because I got this panicky um, view from your CRs that a lot of you are concerned about this and you're not sure what to do. But I just want to specifically know, like, what is it that you are struggling with? You can use you can use the chat box. And considering that there's only 4 of you, what is essentially is Sania, please go ahead.
Hi, Imran.
Hi.
So one of the concerns I had, I'm not sure about everyone else, was regarding plagiarism. Uh,
Mhm.
so like for our undergrad, they would at least let us run the plagiarism checker once or twice using our maybe our advisors turn it in, so that we could at least see if we had any plagiarism and maybe get that number down a bit. But there's only one attempt to submit our essays right now, so like we're not sure how exactly we can, check that and try to mitigate that if possible.
Okay, that's a good point. Other concerns or issues that you are dealing with in writing your essays?
So maybe with citing, I think a lot of us haven't really, I mean, I don't know about everyone, but like I have not really done that. Like we used to have references, but we didn't really do in-text citations as much in our undergrad, so maybe that.
And the guide, the library guide is not helpful. Is it the format you're struggling
Yeah,
with, or is
I
it,
I did use the library guide this time,
yeah.
so I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable now. But I do know a lot of my colleagues didn't use it.
Yeah, because the thing is that people at the library service, they are experts in this. This is their bread and butter. So what they have written and what they have provided is something far superior that something I can develop or something my colleagues can develop. So it's just a question of just reading the short guide and making sure that you are first following that format and you are also the essential idea is that you are paraphrasing anything that you're writing, and then if that idea is coming from some other source, just put it as an in-text citation. So I'm glad, Sanya, that you actually use that guide. And that is what where I see the problem stemming from, that people have not looked at it, because I see end of the text citation sometimes I see an entire paragraph without the citation. So basically there are two fundamental ideas. One is that you paraphrase everything that you put in your words you want to express, and the second thing is that in the brackets you simply put the surnames of the authors that you are citing, and then provide the reference at the end. So, so my advice would be to everyone that go back to the basics, go back to the guide, and then that will solve 80% of your citation problem. Now, about the plagiarism thing, uh, those of you who have joined us, Tanya raised a query about plagiarism, which which essentially she was asking is, why can't we see the percentage, or bring the plagiarism down. We don't have that system here at Manchester, and in a way that's a good thing. It's a good thing because you will not be uh, fretting about trying to get that number down. So we are not really concerned about the outcome. And I think I mentioned this in the first week as well, that all of my colleagues, they are not just going to look at 30% or 40% and just slot you down for a plagiarism hearing. It doesn't work like that. They're going to see which parts of the essays are matching. So you may find that 20% of the matching is just because of the references, because the references are going to match anyway. Or they might find that, okay, you've done it, once or twice, you've taken a direct quote and you've not cited it correctly, and they're going to highlight it. You will be you will only be flagged for plagiarism if there are sizable chunks of other people's work uh, in your work. So I wouldn't worry about plagiarism. And my simple advice for plagiarism is that when you're writing a piece of work, keep an annotated bibliography. An annotated bibliography is simply an Excel sheet where you put, uh, oops, yeah, so just have an Excel sheet in which you copy paste the reference from Google or wherever you're taking the reference from, and then on the side just write an annotation that I've read this piece of work and this is what I understand by it and this is what I'm using it in my essay. As long as you are not copy pasting chunks from the original, there is no way you will be flagged for plagiarism. The many times students and I do this myself, like I find an interesting a paragraph in an article that I want to come back to. Yes, it's fine to copy paste it, but put it in quotations, put it in the page number that you've taken that reference from, and then always have a section in that Excel sheet. I use an Excel sheet for brevity, an annotation which is in your own words, which is just summarizing which point you're taking from that reading and how is it going to help you write the essay. If you just do these two things, you will be at no danger of plagiarism. And just to quote some informal statistics, I'm talking about last time. Of course, plagiarism is a serious offense, but you know, cases that were flagged last time by my colleagues were like less than 5%. Right? So Sani, if you're going through the process of doing it correctly, then there is very, very little chance, less than 1% chance that somebody is going to flag you up for plagiarism. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Imran, thank you. That helps a lot.
Okay. Um, yes. So just jump in and ask questions whenever you have a query. So this workshop is about critical analysis, and this is what you're going to get as feedback. I'm sure you've gotten this as feedback in the formative essay. Your essay is too descriptive. and university teachers' favorite line when giving feedback. But what does this mean? What does this mean anyway? Let me first demystify this. So what do we mean by analysis? Analysis means that whether it's a topic statement, whether it's a question, whether it's a reading, whether it's a proposition, anything that you can cognitively look at, analysis means breaking it into small parts and looking at it in more depth. So you look at in depth at each part using supporting arguments and evidence for and against, as well as how these interrelate to one another. So you're looking at the same issue, the same idea, the same context from different angles and perspective. This could be a policy. So if a simple policy is starting a 4-day work week, which is quite a popular topic for our dissertation students, you're going to look at that topic from different angles, different perspectives, from the vantage point of different stakeholders. If you are looking at any reading, so just in your mind think of the current reading that you're doing or any piece that you are looking at. It simply means that instead of just absorbing the facts of that particular a piece of reading, you are looking at what are the different parts of that piece. What evidence has the author presented in his or her point of view? What arguments is it making? If they've presented a certain argument, does it apply to different contexts? Does it apply in a non-Western setting? Will it apply to white collar workers versus blue collar versus? So you're just taking it apart. And critical analysis means that you use your judgment to question the source, its credibility, and why this particular opinion might not be valid or applicable at all. So in its bare bones, this is what critical analysis is. And simply speaking, in your essays, you are not just being asked to be critical of the text that you're citing, you're also being asked to be self-critical. So in other words, if you make a point of make a point of view. So give me an example, any one of you in the chat box. Um, you know, an essay that you're writing. Just give me a topic, any topic. So I'm still making the point about being self-critical. So let's suppose you have to write an essay on somebody's training and development policy to support organization outcome. Okay, thank you. So let's suppose you're making a point that long-term developmental policies help to retain talented workforce. Okay, let's suppose you are making this point. You can still be self-critical. You cite that point of view, you provide evidence, you provide citation that yes, if internal policies of training and development are good, this may lead to better retention outcomes for talented workers. Okay, that's what you've done. You provided evidence, and then you're expected to be self-critical. You're expected to write a counterpoint why your particular point might not be correct in all circumstances. So you will provide a counterpoint by saying, however, at the same time, many organizations are quite wary of expending a lot of money on training and development because they feel that if their training programs are too good, your workers are going to be poached by other organizations. So you see what you've done? You've presented a point of view and then you've presented counterpoint of view, and that automatically raises the critical depth of your essay. Or perhaps you are presenting a point of view as simple as the discussions that you've been having about um, the place of unions in the modern workplace, right? So you're going to write a paragraph about how unions have historically benefited workers and how important they are in the employment relationship. But at the same time, you're going to be self-critical. You're being uh, you're critically analyzing your own point of view. So you're presenting a counter perspective. So in order to make the essay critical, you have to not only be critical of the sources that you're typing, but as well as the points that you're making. Yes, Isha, please go ahead.
So I just had a question that when we are being self-critical, for example, if I make a point and then I'm trying to critically analyze it, and then I make a statement where I'm critically analyzing what I've written, uh, do I need to again back it up with some like literature, like whatever critical analysis that I've presented, does that need to be validated by some other literature with citations?
Yes, of course, it does
Okay.
because the ask in an essay writing task is that whatever you're saying in 90% of your essays is going to be you saying something and you're making an argument and providing somebody who's done more work than you in this field and using their work to support your arguments. So whether it's your argument, it's a counter argument, citations all the way through. So any strong assertion that you're making, you have to cite it. And even if it's self-evident, and I see this in a lot of essays, in a sort of dissertations, you'll make a sweeping generalization that employees are in favor of work from home policies, right? So that's a very sweeping statement. It's never that everyone is for work from home policies, right? So if
Yeah.
you're making a strong statement, either for or against the argument, you have to provide a citation. So both
Okay.
ways.
Got it. Thank you.
Right. So moving forward, and these are the three questions to ask, taking our idea of a critical analysis. So this applies to papers that you're reading, the models that your professors have told you, even newspaper articles, reports, policies that politicians are throwing about, or even entire body of literature. So the first thing that you do when you come across a piece of work or a piece of policy is first try to understand what is the author uh, trying to convey anyway. Who is the author? What is the key message? When was the key text written? Is it context specific? Is the author making a claim about a certain geographical area, or are they making a claim about some or are they making a generalizable claim? So the first thing that you should do when you take up a piece of work or an idea, just ask yourself, do I understand what it is? What are they trying to say? Who is the author? Uh, if a text is written, if you cite something from 1985, but making a claim to today's day and age, then that particular citation is going to be suspect. So, for example, if you're talking about the 1980s, things were very different in the 1980s. So, if you say something that more women are less likely to climb the corporate ladder because of glass ceiling. Now, that was true in 1985 as well, but in 2023, it's still somewhat true. However, for a claim like that, I would expect a more recent citation. But either way, whatever piece of work that you're quoting, you ask these basic questions. Then you start going into a little bit deeper. Like, what is the quality of evidence? Is the study based on like 5 interviews? Is it based on 50 interviews? Um, is anything omitted? So for example, if you are reading a study about work from home and it only covers like senior management, right? So you are required to declare that and then present your critical analysis and say that evidence suggests that work from home policies have worked for senior management. However, this study was only conducted on a small set of employees, so we have to be very careful about whether we generalize it to other segments of the population. Are assertions supported? Obviously, the pieces of work that you're reading, they also have the responsibility to show that whatever they're claiming, either they have collected the data themselves and those data are credible, or they are citing other credible data. And then you ask, does it include implications for diverse stakeholders and settings? And this is a question I usually get for writing systematic literature reviews that some of you might do in your dissertations as well. Is they say, oh, I can't find information about recruitment and selection bias in China, or I can't find the training and development issues in Brazil. The thing is that for a lot of non-Western settings, you are going to face a problem of trying to get context-specific literature, right? But that's not a bad thing. That you could say as a criticism that this stream of literature and this body of literature are making this recommendation, but it does not, and it has not, it has generally neglected the global South, or it's generally neglected South Asian countries. And then finally, you ask yourself, you evaluate it for you. So not every piece of work is going to apply to the essay that you're writing. So out of the 50 things or 50 papers that you've shortlisted or 30 papers shortlisted, you have to ask yourself, is the text relevant to you? No matter even if it's written by a Nobel Prize winning economist, if it's not relevant to you, it's not relevant to you. Then you also start off with your own position on the subject. Do you agree with this, or you don't agree with this? For a lot of these points, you will agree with it and you'll make it a point. But even if you agree with it, you will, as I said, put a counterpoint and say that, however, on the other hand, there is room to think that evidence exists for the other side of the debate as well. And also, recency in the literature review is also important because you have to see whether it relates or contradicts to other writings on the subject. So you will say that the literature that you found on work from home or work-life balance was saying something in the 1990s, but the literature in the 2020 and beyond is saying something else. So that also shows the analytical depth that you've looked at the literature and you can comment on slight nuances and differences of what was being said before and what was being said now. And most importantly, is it engaging with the literature in your field or the essay that you're trying to write? And this I find really strange why students do this. And what I find strange is that I read a lot of essays in my courses which got like 10 references, but none of the references are from the readings that I've provided. Right? So it's not, I'm not expecting you to cite all of the readings that I've suggested, but at least 60 to 70% of them should be there. Because the thing is that if you quote something from the International Journal of Hospitality or Public Administration or Journal of Nursing and Health about similar issues, that's not a, I'm not going to mark you down on that, but at the same time, we expect that you are engaged with the literature in our field. And for that, you have to go back to the list of journals that I provided in the first week, as well as most of your professors also do. So you can make your you can make your life very easy by starting your literature review from the readings that have been provided to you. In fact, in today's program committee meeting, there was this issue raised by your class representatives that all of you are quite overwhelmed with the amount of reading you have to do. Now, you have to do a lot of readings in a master's program, that's a given. But most of the reading lists that we provide are not necessarily to be read for every class. Those are just exhaustive list of good quality papers that you can use and that you should use for your uh, uh, for your for your essays. Okay, so all of what I've talked about right now, I'm sure it's very abstract. Okay, uh, so the the reading that I had circulated, right? I'm conscious of the fact that we are very few people, and you may not have had time to do the reading. So let me just give you a very brief recap of what the article was, and then I'm going to ask you to apply your critical reading on it. So basically, what the article is saying is a new format of performance management. So the old format of performance management was that you were going to get a performance management at the end of the year. You are going to record your goals and objectives. Uh, they are going to be written down, and your targets are going to be measured. And based on those targets, you're going to get an increment or you're getting a promotion. And this is what happens in most organizations. It has been happening in most organizations. And now Capelli and Travis are basically saying that this is an old-fashioned way of doing things. Now is the era for modern performance management in which there shouldn't be any appraisal forms. The It should be completely developmental based. It should be based on an informal conversation with your line manager. And basically, employees should be trusted to be in charge of their own performance. So we should essentially do away with the yearly appraisal where you sit down and you collect evidence and you write evidence, and then it's checked and you have a meeting and then you get a score for out of 4, and you're ranked against other colleagues, right? So basically, essentially, this is what the article is saying. uh, Oops. So I want you to think about this. And so what is the article about? So what I've just said, that's the descriptive question. Like, this is what we know what the article is saying. Now, my question to you is, what analytical questions do you need to ask? In other words, what are you going to question about this piece without just taking the author's word for it? And what is your assessment of the text? So essentially, those of you who've read it, what did you think about it? And even before you can go about what to think about it, the questions you have to not just take the text on its face value, you have to be able to come up with questions to criticize it, to ask further questions of it. So the new system that I described to you, what sort of problems could be there in this system? Start from that point of view.
Hi, sorry. So A part of the question that you said right now, the first thing I thought after reading this article is that it clearly has some limitations because the example of Deloitte and PwC, it clearly stands for Western companies, like in post-Soviet Union countries where I work in one of Big Fours, we still use annual appraisals. So it doesn't apply to all of the offices of Big Four companies in the world, and it's not mentioned in the article.
Excellent. This is how you start thinking about being critical. Your first question to ask is that what kind of companies are they giving examples of? First of all, they're giving examples of these big either tech companies or consultancy companies, and they are only talking about they're talking about most of these companies are Western based. So, to what extent is this applicable to other industries? To what extent is it available applicable to other contexts? Yes, that's how you start thinking critically. Then your next set of questions similar would be any idea what else will you question about the assertions? Anyone else? Would you not look at the source? What do you think about the source? Where is this study published? So if you're talking about Harvard Business Review, would you consider Harvard Business Review to be a good source? Well, Harvard Business Review is not exactly a journal, but it's still considered a very high ranking journals. So if you're not sure about the source, starting point, as I said, what your professors have what your professors have given you in reading lists, those are all going to be from good sources. What I would caution you against is doing a random search on Google Scholar uh, to check whether the publication is of good quality, because Google Scholar indexes everything. It indexes local journals, poor quality journals, predatory journals. So if you really want to have a good answer a basic question whether it meets the minimum standard of quality, use the library website. And in the library's website, narrow it down to peer-reviewed journals. Also, if you want to narrow it further down, look at the list of journals that I shared in the first week, as well as the journal lists. I'm sure a lot of your professors have shared. Um, so we are questioning the source. We are questioning what is written. We are questioning whether it's applicable to certain locations or not. Another very important thing to consider, especially in this paragraph, sorry, this program, is what is the implications for any policy on industrial relations. So if you're talking about unionized workplaces are dealing with concrete things. They are dealing with evidence. They're dealing with data. They're dealing with performance measures. So if they want to argue about something, how are you going to argue for your representative if everything is informal? If the performance appraisal doesn't even exist on paper? And then you look at it from the business point of view. From the business point of view, as Asim was saying, uh, that in certain cultures, in certain countries, if you don't have the evidence, how are you going to justify the increments? How are you going to justify promotions? So, although this idea that Capelli and Tavis are purporting is intuitively appealing because most people do hate performance appraisals. But what are the practical realities of it? What are the practical elements of it? Not just from the perspective of organizational efficiency, from the perspective of acceptance from employees, from the perspective of what kind of industries these are likely to work, and also what sort of context is it likely to work. And as I said, in your program, in the kind of philosophy that we are talking about in this program, what does this particular idea mean for broader issues of collective organizations and employee representation? So you see what we've done, we've taken a very well written article and by quite influential scholars, but still we are able to take it apart, analyze it, and be critical, and then use it for our own work. Does this example make sense to everyone?
Yes.
And and basically this is what you're doing for the rest of your for all of your for all of your courses. Now, as an exercise with yourself, uh, do this with a reading that you're finding particularly difficult or it's not connecting with you. Just ask yourself, you've read it, close it down. What is this article about? What is the idea that I'm taking away? And then what questions do I need to ask in order to establish that not only is this relevant, but the assertions that are being made are accurate, they are representative, they help to answer the question or the query that I have. And then you make a judgment about whether you want to include that text in your work or you don't want to, you want to include it. What you will not do in an essay, and this is like a big no-no, if you take one thing from this discussion, please take this. What you are not going to do is just pick 10 or 15 random 10 or 15 articles about a topic like voice and provide summaries of them. That is what we call a descriptive work. So what you tend to do is you think that what your professors are expecting is that how good you've done a literature review and how well you've summarized it. Obviously, any work that you're citing, you're going to first tell us what it is. But your job doesn't stop there. Your job is to take it apart and to link how you're using in it to construct your argument. And I did this as well. When I first wrote the first draft of my literature review for my PhD, the comment I got is that why are you are writing a thesis, you're not writing a handbook, you're not writing an encyclopedia entry, and you are not creating a shrine for these authors. So what I'd done is exactly that. I had mostly summarize it and praise the work without critically looking at it. So stay away from an essay which is just a summary of what you've read. That is a short way of getting a very low grade. So make sure that you take apart the argument that is being made and point to the examiner that you have identified these issues with this work, but despite identifying these issues, there are some important points which are relevant for your uh, argument. So just some final things to uh, consider, just to bring everything together. Ask yourself, when was the article written? Has there been further evidence since then? Sometimes you get a point or you get an article that you're really excited about, but it's written in 1990. 1990 might seem psychologically 10 years ago, but it's now 33 years ago. Is the proposition convincing? Whatever they're trying to convey, does it appeal to you? Does it connect with what you understand about the topic? Is that particular piece of work applicable to, as Sam also correctly pointed out, will this work in different industries? So this Capelli Tavis's article about a very free-flowing kind of performance management, I do my work, a lot of work in the banking industry. It's never going to work in the banking industry because it's a very regulated industry and you have to have evidence, you have to have paper trails for everything. So will it be applicable to different kinds of jobs? Will it be applicable to different cultures? Because certain cultures have high uncertainty avoidance, so that they want structure. It might not work in high uncertainty avoidance culture. Um, uh, like as I said, the idea be equally applicable in diverse institutional contexts. Right, so you have different regulations, you have different financial systems, different educational systems. Will this particular idea work in other contexts? So you're doing a lot of work on industrial relations, and a lot of that work is Eurocentric, which I'm sure you would have seen. Your job would be, are these theories going to work in India or China or Brazil or Indonesia? Considering the institutional environments in these contexts. Again, something very important from your perspective, and this is again, some students make a mistake even in industrial relations courses. So this is something I told you in the beginning of the session as well, that your degree is a degree in human resource management and industrial relations. What does that mean? What means is that human resource management as a field was primarily designed to look at efficiency and effectiveness solutions for people management from the employer's perspective. Then later on, employee well-being came into the discussion, but mainstream human resource management literature looks at employee well-being, a job of human resource departments or the job of management. But the industrial relation perspective says that no, wait, we appreciate what management and HR is doing. However, we also need an indirect way of representation, which is through industrial relations. So never forget the industrial relations element of your argument, because we are talking about a holistic assessment of the employment relationship. Later on in your essays, you can do a self-reflection as well, especially towards the end. Is it consistent with your own experience? But when you are quoting your own experience, don't let that be a substitute for a cited example or a published example. Also, if you want to have a holistic idea, if you're talking about making a suggestions or a recommendation, would that particular recommendation have implications on other HR practices? So for example, if you're introducing this new performance management system, what implications will it have on compensation? How would the compensation manager determine whether, when you have self-assessed yourself, it's a fair self-assessment? And from a practical perspective, this I see every time. Are you constructing an entire paragraph based on one paper, on one study? Right. So if you're trying to make a point about recruitment and selection biases can be removed when technology is involved, if you just take one citation and provide a summary of that citation and make your entire paragraph based on one citation, that's not actually critical analysis. That's just providing a summary of one study, which you're not supposed to do. So even if you're constructing a point from one important study or one seminal study, cite 3 or 4 others who are first saying the same things, and in the next paragraph, 2 or 3 who are opposing that point of view. So please be mindful of not constructing an entire paragraph based on just one study. Also, disclaimer, be mindful of the subject unit specific requirements. Read, reread, get after your professors if you do not understand what the requirement is, because what I've shared are general ideas about critical analysis. I'm sure your colleagues have already made clear what they expect, but if you're not clear, ask. I said this earlier, look out for where your instructors are drawing their readings from, which sources, which journals. Be careful about using deterministic, managerial, absolutist discussion. it'll be less rewarded. Your employees may expect managerial language and solutions, but not here. So a very good example of this is if you say something as simple as human resource managers can be a strong voice for no, human resource managers are a strong voice for employees. No, you use more flexible language. Evidence suggests that human resource managers can be a useful source of voice for employees, or are they are likely to be a good source of voice. So be very careful of using deterministic absolutist language, and also be careful of using managerial language. So for example, saying going into a moralistic normative language by saying uh, multinational companies should take care of subcontracted employees in the global south. We are not arguing that multinational companies shouldn't do that. What I'm saying is that in your essay, you should be more mindful of how you express this. You can say that according to the stakeholder theory, multinational organizations would be better off if they took better care of their of employees in the broader supply chain. Instead of saying they should do this, they have to do this, they need to do this. If you don't know, ask. And there is no shortcut to this. You have to read more to write better, regardless of your fluency uh, in English. I've included some sources from some one from the Leeds library, which is quite useful. So we do have about 10-12 minutes. Any questions about what I have said? Please feel free to ask them. And as I said, I could hold 10 workshops like this, but writing and researching and analysis is a function of doing. So please feel free to ask any questions that you have.
Will you be also sharing the presentation with us?
You mean the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Yes, so I'm going to upload these. Well, I can circulate them as well, but I'm taking. So, sorry. Yeah, I will circulate them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or queries? Okay then. Good luck with your writing. And as I said, just like you have to start writing, and you really have to you are never going to get it right on the first try. There has to be a process of revision. And I think I shared this in the first class as well, that the pieces that you read, you know, even if it's like a newspaper article, definitely if it's a research paper, that piece has gone through at least 7 rounds of edits and revisions after you have submitted it to the journal. Even before we submitted it, we go through lots of revisions within co-authors. But after you submit it, it goes through an average of 7 rounds. So what you see, a polished, perfectly written piece, is doesn't come suddenly by writing it for the first time, right? It comes from writing, rewriting, revising, improving. And that's why I tell you to do the assignments early. But there's no shortcut to that process. You have to go through it. All right, if that is all, I will let you all go. Thanks for joining, and hopefully it was helpful.
Thank you so much for holding this workshop. I think it gave us a lot more clarity. And like you said, maybe like when it comes to other things like citations, the more we do, the more we'll get a hold of it.
And just go back to the basics. If a guide is there, follow the guide from A to Z. You'll be okay.
Right, right.
All right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you.